Hello, welcome back to the channel. It's me, Emmy the Cat Lady, and you join me back here in Point Lookout at the Homestead Motel to talk about a couple of other locations. So because I missed last week with all the nonsense that happened in my personal life, I thought I would just double up because both of these locations, they're going to be quite short anyway, so I thought it would make sense just to combine the two that I intended to do last week and this week into one video for you guys. So we're starting here at the Homestead Motel, which we were here before when we did the Velvet Curtain quest. And there's a couple of other interesting things that we can find in this location that I think are worth talking about. So pre-war, Point Lookout was a tourist attraction. It was a tourist location. You know, we've got the boardwalk, there's Ferris wheel and everything. So having, you know, accommodation like motels and hotels isn't to be unexpected. That's typical of tourist locations that you'd find these places. So we've got the Homestead Motel here, which promises 72 channels on the TV and free air conditioning. So what more could you really need here at Pilgrim's Landing? So the rooms are not dissimilar to kind of a small motel. Certainly I have stayed in one in Georgia years and years ago when I flew over for a friend's wedding. You know, so we've got the rooms kind of spaced around. There's kind of two floors here, and then this bit in the centre would be the parking lot. Obviously not looking great, and we've got these dogs. So there is a pack of vicious dogs that hang around in this area, but I've got animal friends, so they don't care about me, which is fine. There's only a couple of rooms that are open to us, and the ones that we can go in and do actually have lit lanterns outside them to kind of draw your eye in to let you know that they're there. But wanted to check in the office first. So the office is around here. This is quite entertaining. So there is free breakfast at this motel, which is apparently all you can eat mole rat chunks. So the arrows point at this dead mole rat. I didn't kill this mole rat. It was there when I got here. So there you go. There's not much in the office. This is the office door here. Obviously this is where guests would come and check in to collect their keys. So, you know, nothing that exciting in here. We've got an old coffee machine, there's a desk, some shelves, bathrooms. You know, nothing too exciting, but we do have a couple of keys. There's also a shotgun and some ammo and stuff, but we've got a room key there. And then I think there's another room key in here as well. There's a safe and some jet and cigarettes and whatnot. So just your typical kind of random bits and pieces of loot. So nothing too exciting. But we've got the keys for two other rooms in this location. So first one, we visited 1D already as part of the Velvet Curtain quest. So that is Agent Dr. Jiang, who is the Chinese double agent. This is Dr. Jiang here. And is now going to be staying here until probably the heat death of the universe. So this is where you would begin that quest. Obviously motel room, fairly typical design really. You've got the bed, you know, desk, a sideboard, and then a little bathroom in there as well. So, you know, it's kind of what you'd expect. So we know the story of that one, but there are two others. So I think this one here is 1G. Yeah. So we've got the key, so let's see what's in here. Oh dear. Well, there's bloodstains on the carpet, there's pre-war money everywhere, a massive trunk with some Confederate hats and things. So we've got one skeleton here with a shotgun and a pile of money and a pile of blood. And then there's another skeleton in the bathroom who also has a gun and a suitcase and a pile of pre-war money. So, yeah, there's obviously been some kind of shootout in here between these two with the positioning of them. One's been hiding in the bathroom and the other's been hiding behind the bed, and they've obviously been trying to take each other out. So, we don't really know. There's no context really other than there's a lot of money lying about. So, is this two, you know, criminals that were fighting each other, you know, having a shootout? Or was it, you know, a criminal and the police? I don't think the police typically use double-barrel shotguns for most things, but was that drug deal gone wrong? What happened here? But obviously there was some kind of altercation between these two. See, yeah, you've got random bits of electronics and things, but there's a lot of money about, so that would kind of suggest that potentially some kind of criminal activity was going on here, and maybe they killed each other. They're both lying with their guns near their hands, so we don't really know, but something, obviously, there was some kind of altercation between these two that ended badly. So, kind of an interesting little story, but not anything too groundbreaking. But the final location is room 1K, which I think you have to get to round the back. I say you can tell which ones you can go in because they do have a little lantern outside, so there it is there. So this is 1K. Yeah. Definitely something a bit more serious going on in here. What a mess. So, yeah, somebody, I think, has been trying to summon something. We've got these creepy totems with, I think they're like Brahmin skulls and human skulls inside Brahmin skulls. Oh, that's kind of weird. Yeah. So there's a human skull inside a Brahmin skull, and then there's a human arm that's kind of reaching out through the mouth. That's interesting. These guys that are upside down. So yeah, we've got all these creepy skeletal totems. There's blood literally everywhere. And organs, lovely. So it's quite a mess, and some of it, with all the blood splatter and things, it does make you wonder if maybe some of it is a bit more recent, and it wasn't like this happened pre-war. Maybe some of the locals have been trying to summon something, or sacrifice someone to deity. Maybe Ugwal Toth. We know there is connections between the Ugwal Toth, the kind of eldritch stuff, and Point Lookout, and the connection to them, and the Dunwich, who are connected to the Ugwal Toth stuff. So it's entirely possible, because these are, it's not just decoration. These are kind of specific totems that would indicate some kind of ritual. There's also blood on the ceiling, so that, wait, no, it's not on the ceiling, it's floating about a foot below the ceiling. Yeah, something supernatural's going on here for sure. I don't think we can deny it. Or were they trying to summon someone else? Because if we look in the bathroom, we've got this, the pint-sized slasher mask. So was that who they were trying to summon? Clowns, I find clowns kind of creepy, and I know I'm not the only person that feels that way about them. I think they are. And this is the second location, Point Lookout, where you can find one of these masks. The other one is in Kenny's Cave that we visited at the Herzog Mine, but you can also find one here. And it's an interesting one because the pint-sized slasher, it was a pre-war kind of urban legend or myth about a serial killer that was believed to be either a child or child-sized. And there is a Capital Post article from July 2052 that shows up on loading screens, and you can also read it at the Capital Post's offices, alongside an article that details the disbanding of the United Nations after being unable to broker a peace between the European Commonwealth, which is kind of what was the EU before it became the EU in our world. It's kind of a similar thing to that. And there was obviously the war between the European Commonwealth and the Middle East, and the United Nations kind of fell apart because of that, and that in part played a role in the developing conflict between the Chinese and America and everything. So, you can read that, but there's also an article about the pint-sized slasher, implicating them in the Linden Street slayings in DC, and that was based on the wounds being consistent with a child's height. And there was also an eyewitness statement from a man called Christopher Atkinson, who said that he saw his brother Sean die, and claims it was the pint-sized slasher. But these masks might not be the original. You do also have one that you get in Tranquility Lane that's obviously been added to the simulation by Dr. Braun. But there were a lot of replicas made, as because this became an urban legend, it became a popular Halloween costume. And given the bombs fell in October, people would have been potentially preparing for Halloween, so it kind of makes sense that a couple of these might be lying around. It's not that different, in our, in real life, people like to dress up as Ghostface or Michael Myers or, Freddy Krueger, all these kind of iconic horror characters and that kind of thing. So it kind of makes sense that the same thing would happen in the Fallout universe, and people would be kind of enamored with this story about this child serial killer and want to dress up as them for Halloween. So it doesn't really give us any answers here. I mean, there's more skeleton parts here in the bathtub as well. So somebody's been trying to summon something by the looks of things. But the fact that the pint-sized slasher mask is here, and I say you can read that article if you go to the Capitol Post offices in DC. On the computers, you can see some of their kind of archived articles and things, and I think a couple that were supposed to be published before the bombs kind of put a stop to everything. So yeah, very, very interesting little aside here, and if you do want your own pint-sized slasher mask, then you can take that and you can wear it. So, except I can't because I haven't finished the plot, so I can't actually put any headwear on. Never mind. Yep, that's the thing, because somebody's cut my head open and tried to unscooped out some of the insides. I can't put hats on, which is an interesting thing. But anyway, so next up, so as I said, we're getting a 2-for-1 this week to make up for missing last week. So because the motel stuff was quite short, so we are going to this location, which is the Disaster Relief Outpost. So I will see you when I get over there. Here we are. So this is the Disaster Relief Outpost. It's right on the kind of beach almost to the west of Pilgrim's Landing. And it's a very interesting place with a lot of interesting history. So this was set up during the New Plague, which was the disease that broke out shortly kind of before the Great War happened, and it was also this was a sort of viral pandemic that was pretty serious, and their attempts to find a treatment for this plague was how the FEV virus came to be, which we obviously talked about the history of that in the past. So there's some first aid boxes and stuff in the medical tent here. So this outpost was set up in response to that as a kind of community outreach program. And because, they ended up creating the FEV virus to try and deal with this disease, as you can imagine, that probably didn't go well. And I mean, one thing that I will say is a lot of people don't really understand some of the stuff around public health, infectious diseases, and epidemiology, even when they think they do. And I think that was very evident in the last few years after what happened in 2020. And I know there's lots of conspiracy theories out there about the COVID and about the vaccine and whatnot. And I have studied public health epidemiology. I've administered thousands of vaccines and personally managed 2 serious parvovirus outbreaks successfully. And misinformation about this kind of stuff is insidious and a highly dangerous problem. And that's real life. And the Fallout world is different because it's all fictional, and the conspiracy theories could actually be accurate, unlike in real life. And it's one of these things that I think people can struggle to wrap their heads around how these things work and how the immune system works and things, because it is all very complicated, especially when you get into the nitty-gritty of it. But this new plague was obviously a problem and continues to be, because it's the same thing that if you meet McCready in Fallout 4 when he's an adult, and he is looking for treatment for his son who has this new plague, and that's why he came to Boston, hoping that he could find some treatment for his son. So, it's definitely something that was a problem, but I think this setup here is quite interesting. So this camp was set up to register and isolate infected individuals to control the new plague, or to register civilians and weed out the communists. So we'll have a look at the notes on the computer in here, because I think it's very, very interesting. There's also a stealth boy here. So we've got the mission parameters. So evaluate medical and social needs of the local populace, raise awareness of health risks and provide aid on a local need basis, assist with the Federal Fitness Registry compliance programme. Volunteers must always uphold the standards of the collective benevolence programme in public and in private. So that's kind of what they say, and registered the Federal Fitness Registry, so they were registering people for the federal government, which is an interesting one. And I think the PSA, so that you know the signs about the new plague, the public information. So this is very interesting. So know the signs. Safeguard yourself and your community by knowing how to identify a person suffering from the new plague. Common symptoms include profuse sweating, otherwise known as hyperhidrosis, unexplained contusions and swelling, contusions is bruises, massive external hemorrhaging, hemorrhaging is bleeding, and new ideals like socialism. Obviously, viruses can change your political alignment, apparently, and we can't have that. So there you go. Because socialism is just one step towards communism, apparently. It's really it's kind of funny, but it's also kind of not funny. It's like, oh yeah, bruises, bleeding, sweating, and socialism. One of these things is not like the others. So remember to CIR, which is the protocol. So when you believe you've come into contact with a person exhibiting one or more of these telltale signs, remember to CIR. C. Confirm symptoms. Approach the person suffering from symptoms if no civil or medical professional is available to do so. Verify that the subject is exhibiting symptoms of new plague, like, universal healthcare ideas or something, I guess. Once it's been established, we need to isolate them. So a case of new plague may be present. Separate yourself and the person exhibiting symptoms from the general population, as the new plague is notoriously contagious. And then R is to report. Report directly to the nearest Federal Fitness Registry of Medical Centre and let the professionals handle it from there. Which, for infectious diseases, this on its own doesn't sound too crazy or dystopian. There is such a thing as notifiable diseases. I say I'm not sure how it works elsewhere, but certainly in the UK, in the veterinary medicine, there are certain diseases that if we suspect or diagnose them in an animal, we have to report it to the government, and we have to take certain actions to prevent the spread and things. And there's a whole list of them. Rabies is a big one, because the UK is rabies free. We don't have rabies in the UK. There is bat virus, but that's not quite the same as rabies. So if I suspected the dog of having rabies, then I would have to contact the government and take their instructions on what to do to handle it. But there's loads of other ones as well, and across farm animals. So, something like BSE, mad cow disease, is still notifiable if you suspect it. Blue tongue, foot and mouth disease, and I remember this was before I was in the veterinary industry, but in 2001 we had a huge foot and mouth disease outbreak in the UK, and I was actually going on a school trip to France and Belgium, and so we were on the bus, so we drove all the way down to Dover to get the ferry across to France, and you could just see the piles of livestock that they had to euthanize, and they had to cremate, they had to burn and things, and it was awful. So it's one of those diseases, if you suspect it, you have to stay where you are and speak to DEFRA, the government, and they'll tell you what to do, and you have to set up an isolation. It's a so that in itself isn't too crazy, but given that they're listing some of the symptoms of this disease as being like socialism, it's obviously a way for the government to keep tabs on anybody that might have ideas that go against what they particularly want, or that they think might be becoming a bit of a communist. So it's an interesting one, and I think the thing is that they refer to it as a social disease, which means it's especially contagious and can be commonly caught in the course of social interactions. That's what they say. But the term social disease is a polite euphemism for either a harmful societal problem, I guess like socialism, or an STI. So STI is like, now I can't think of any. Like syphilis is a social disease. So, and it's a polite euphemism for it. So, how do you keep yourself safe? We need to avoid ice cream socials. I guess, or bring protection. I don't know. Cruising Main Street, promiscuous activity or sodomy. Definitely make sure that you're bringing protection to keep the socialism out if you're participating in such activities, and attending fairs and festivals. So best protection is to stay home and enjoy a novel or a home cooked meal, and limit your exposure to other people is the best way to avoid contracting the new plague. So again, you could see this as, oh well, there's an infectious disease, everybody stays at home and then it doesn't spread, and that's fair enough. But there's obviously, they're not wanting people to get together and to share ideas that maybe things aren't going so well in the country and things. And this is before leaving the war, because it was kind of set up in 2059, but they were obviously still worried about the problem of communism and all that kind of stuff spreading. And then this is the best part. So don't worry, the government can protect you from the new plague and other biological dangers. It's true. All you need to do is visit your local federal fitness registry, and friendly federal professionals will be on hand to take a few minor samples and enter you in the national registry. Your compliance not only keeps professionals up to date on your medical history and status, but contributes to valuable research programs and makes you eligible for special prizes. They don't really specify what samples they're talking about. They say a few minor samples. Does that mean like they're going to take a little bit of blood and urine, or are they going to just do a wee little lobotomy just to rule out socialism? We don't really know, but you can win some great prizes like fuel rations or vacations to exotic domestic locales. I'm not entirely sure what this is supposed to mean. Exotic tends to suggest that you're going to somewhere that's very different from where you're from. But if it's exotic and domestic, I mean, what does that mean? Does that just mean like you can go to Hawaii, or yeah, it's yeah, and I dare say that probably these prizes weren't that commonplace. So it's not even a it's not even a subtle attempt at propaganda. It's very clear that they're wanting to register people that might be getting funny ideas that they don't like, rather than it being about actually controlling a disease that is causing problems. That's obviously something that the government need to at least be seen to be doing something about. And it seems like this is the way that they went about that, but they were less concerned about actually protecting people from actual illness and more interested in spying on their citizens, essentially. So we've got these logs here. So this is the logs that were left by whoever was in charge of this. So they got set up, the first group of volunteers. There's no federal presence. But there's some leftover equipment they've got authorised to use, some basic antibiotics and hygiene supplies, and some new plague awareness pamphlets. Not much to work with, but they got settled at the motel, so they were obviously staying at one of the rooms in the motel that we just visited. Kind of wonder if they were in 1G or 1K. Don't know. Wasn't much to kind of go on, so they're setting up an outreach centre while the rest of the volunteers get out into the community and get a feel for the people that are here. And then the next one, the location is a joke. It's half built, and what's been put together looks like it's going to fall in on itself anytime. The real estate company wasn't much help. Sent a request for field supplies so can set up an outdoor centre until this situation can be improved upon. Their area lacks basic infrastructure, so they probably want to get started with some basic vaccines and sanitation supplies. So she's requested that, but they haven't got enough of a grasp on the local situation to ask for more. So they begin kind of setting up a way to outreach into the community. So they set up an outreach event in the town. So most of the people in the area of Point Lookout are from urban centres, sort of construction workers and support staff and things. But there's also a rural population that don't have a pot to piss in, so they don't have much money, the rural population, and these are the people that they want to help, but they don't come into the town, so they're going to have to try and find another way to kind of get to these people to offer them aid. So Victoria, one of the volunteers, was badly wounded. She took a bunch of supplies up to the Arkindove Cathedral, which is where the tribals are. Most of the locals are living in primitive dwellings in the wetlands, but it seems like there was nobody there when she arrived, and she went out into the swamp to try and find people at one of the shacks, and she has a wound on the back of her head. It sounds like her skull was fractured. She doesn't really remember anything beyond blacking out. Nothing was stolen from her, so the medical supplies and things were left where they were, but they're now wary of sending people out alone, because obviously someone attacked this woman and did her an injury, so they don't really know, the locals who would become the swamp folk were clearly not interested in dealing with anybody from this volunteer group. So yeah, it didn't really go very well for them. Then is this? Yeah, this is the one. So you think, the place looks kind of abandoned, but it's actually not, because Marcella.
Did you want to talk? I won't bite.
Yeah, this is Marcella. So Marcella's here for a reason. She is a missionary who's come here to Point Lookout to spread her message, and she settled here as base camp because it kind of made sense. It was enough for her to kind of get organised and have somewhere to stay. And she's been investigating Obadiah Blackhall and his connection to the swamp folk, which we can see from her journal.
Go with God, child.
Yeah. So she does have a little journal, which she didn't really seem to care that much about us looking through, but we've got some notes about the locals. So Obadiah Blackhall, manipulator, asked her to recover a book, which is apparently a family heirloom, and she's got a bad feeling. And she's investigating it, but he wouldn't really give her much information. So connection with regional beliefs goes back to an ancestor, and the book needs to be destroyed. So that's part of the quest that Obadiah Blackhall gives you with the Krivbekna. So he wants you to go and get that and bring it to him. But once you've spoken to him, Marcelo will come running up to you and say, did he ask you to go find a book? If you find it, destroy it, bring it to me and we'll destroy it. So that's what you do. And then Tobar the ferryman, so he's willing to listen to her, but she has a feeling that there's something going on with him. So she's going to keep an eye on things. And then she's talking about the tribals. So they go up to the cathedral, and she would like to see if there's any intact texts or anything. But the tribals don't really like people from outside. But she's kind of debating about whether to go through with their induction or not. So yeah, she's obviously been kind of investigating things, and she's been in a few places. So if we have a look, she's been to the pit. So she took shelter with a merchant and hearing tales from the pit. So she hasn't been there, but she's heard about it, and she's wondering if she should go there. But she keeps going east to the Commonwealth. So Marcella has visited the Commonwealth, which is interesting. I've done what good I can here. Need to get out before it catches up with me. Was able to barter passage on a boat, headed south. Don't know where I'll end up, but that's the nature of his work. So, yeah, so she was off preaching in the Commonwealth. And then she's decided to leave there. Kind of makes sense. It's a bit of a wild place. And then in the capital wasteland, so she's talking about Tobar. She spent the afternoon trading at Rivet City, and met Father Clifford, who's the pastor of Rivet City, and she's quite happy to see another believer, and wants to go back there soon. So, she's had quite the journey, especially having visited the Commonwealth and things, and she's hearing stories about the pit, which obviously is Pittsburgh, so not that far away as the crow flies. But the main thing with Marcella's... Thank you. So the main thing with Marcella is that once you speak to Obadiah Blackhall and he says, go get the Krivbekna, which is the book that's connected to all the Eldritch stuff, and then she'll say, no, bring it to me, we'll destroy it, that's safer. But once you have the Krivbekna, you come back here and you find that Marcella is dead, and you'll usually see a handful of smugglers. It's very likely that they're the ones that killed her. And then if you go in, you find her body, and she's left you a message, and she tells you to seek a place called Dunwich to destroy the book and keep the Eldritch horrors at bay. So that gives you the choice of either giving it to Obadiah or taking it back to the capital wasteland with you, going to Dunwich, going into the creepy what they call the virulent underchambers or whatever they're called, and you can use the book at the obelisk thing, and that destroys it, which is what Marcella wants you to do. So yeah, it's a very interesting location, and it's one of these things that, obviously the government were out here to keep an eye on people, and under the guise of, we're helping with this pandemic, this new plague that's becoming a problem. But they were really using it to kind of register people and to monitor for any kind of suspicious kind of political leanings that the government wanted to kind of put a stop to before it spread. Essentially, it's they're being quite obvious about what they're actually trying to do when you read the stuff, but it's the kind of thing, this is the kind of thing that was happening, you see that all in a lot of things where, people would get accused of being a bit of a communist, people were losing jobs over it, that kind of thing, and obviously a lot of Asian descended people in America were treated pretty horribly, even if they'd literally never set foot in China, and they weren't even sort of Chinese heritage and things. That it's the kind of thing, and it happens, and it's happened in real life as well, not just here in the States, but everywhere, stuff like that. Even, when I was talking on the Cyberdog video, the German Shepherd dog breed that sort of during and for a while after the Second World War, people called them Alsatians because they didn't want to have any kind of association with something that was German for obvious reasons. And certainly a lot of people, certainly, my parents' generation and older, still refer to them as Alsatians in a lot of cases. So it's it's one of these things, and it's interesting, but there's a lot of kind of questionable stuff happened in this location. So next week we've got another really interesting one for you, which the research for has probably put me on a watch list somewhere, but I'm also an author, so that was kind of inevitable. But it should be a very interesting one, so hopefully you'll come back for that. And don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more. It really does help things out quite a lot. And I hope I'll be back with some more interesting things on Saturday. So I will see you then. Bye.